The signal arrived on a Tuesday. Dr. Sarah Chen was running her usual analysis of data from the Deep Space Array when the pattern emerged from the background noise, a perfectly structured sequence of prime numbers that could only be artificial in origin. She double-checked her calculations, then triple-checked them, her hands trembling as she reached for her phone to call the director. Within hours, observatories worldwide confirmed it. Humanity had received its first message from an extraterrestrial civilization. But as the initial excitement gave way to careful analysis, a disturbing reality emerged. The signal wasn't just a greeting, it was a beacon, and it was getting stronger. The Krivax High Command vessel, Eternal Dominion, hung in the darkness of deep space, its crystalline hull reflecting the distant starlight. Fleet Commander Zarkax stood before the tactical display, his iridescent scales shifting colors as he processed the latest reports from their advanced scouts. "Fascinating," he murmured, manipulating the holographic representation of Earth and its primitive defense systems. "They've barely mastered nuclear fission, yet they're already reaching for the stars." His second-in-command, Sub-Commander Vextra, clicked her mandibles dismissively. "Another species of dreamers, nothing more. They'll kneel like all the others." But Zarkax wasn't so sure. Something about these humans troubled him. In the standard cycle of conquest, most species focus solely on defensive preparations after detecting the Krivax beacon. Humans, however, had done something unexpected. They'd responded with their own message, packed with scientific knowledge, art, and music. "They seek to communicate," Zarkax noted, "even knowing we vastly overpower them. Either incredibly foolish or..." He left the thought unfinished. On Earth, the global response to first contact had moved beyond the initial panic into something more productive. Humanity had always excelled at preparing for the worst while hoping for the best, and this situation was no different. Dr. Chen found herself at the heart of it all, working with an international team of scientists, military strategists, and diplomats. They gathered in a hastily assembled command center beneath the Rocky Mountains, analyzing every scrap of data they could gather about their mysterious visitors. "The energy readings from their ships are off the charts," Dr. Chen explained to the assembled leaders. "Their technology appears to operate on principles we've barely begun to theorize about. But there's something else." She pulled up a series of complex calculations. "Their communications are perfectly logical, mathematically precise, almost artificially so. There's no variation, no creativity in their patterns. It's as if they're following a script that's worked 1,000 times before." General Maria Santos, representing Earth's newly unified defense forces, leaned forward. "You're saying they're predictable?" "Potentially," Chen replied. "They're advanced, yes, but they appear to be rigid. Every response follows the same pattern we've detected in their beacon. They expect a certain reaction from us, and when we deviate from it..." The general's eyes narrowed. "We confuse them." In the depths of space, Zarkax was reaching a similar conclusion about humanity's peculiarities. Their responses didn't fit any of the standard patterns the Krivax had encountered in their millennia of conquest. Most species either attacked immediately upon detecting the beacon or frantically tried to hide. Humans did neither. Instead, they studied, they learned, they adapted, and most disturbing of all, they innovated. "They've modified their primitive radar systems," Vextra reported, genuine concern in her usually confident voice. "Somehow, they've already found a way to detect our cloaked scout ships." Zarkax felt an unfamiliar sensation, doubt. The Krivax had conquered thousands of worlds, each more advanced than Earth, yet none had managed to spot their stealth technology so quickly. These humans were different. They didn't just use technology, they transformed it, pushed it beyond its intended purposes. As the Krivax fleet moved closer to Earth, both sides prepared for the inevitable first physical contact. But while the Krivax relied on their tested strategies and overwhelming technological superiority, humanity was already doing what it did best, innovating, adapting, and preparing surprises. Dr. Chen stared at the latest data streams, a small smile playing across her face. The Kravaks thought they were dealing with primitive beings who would follow the same patterns as all their previous conquests. They were about to learn that humans had a habit of rewriting the rules. "Send the next transmission," she instructed her team. "Let's show them something they've never seen before." The message that left Earth's atmosphere that day contained no weapons specifications, no military capabilities, no threats or pledges of submission. Instead, it carried something the Kravaks had never encountered in all their conquests, an invitation to learn from each other. As Zarkax watched the message play out before him, he felt that unfamiliar doubt grows stronger. For the first time in Kravaks' history, they faced an enemy that didn't fit their models, a species that saw first contact not as the beginning of conquest, but as an opportunity for growth. The game was about to change, and only one side knew they were playing by new rules. The assessment. The Kravaks observation fleet had never encountered anything quite like the Sol system's third planet. For 6 months, they had watched, analyzed, and tried to understand the puzzling species that called Earth home. Their findings were troubling. "They argue constantly," Subcommander Vextra reported, her scales shifting to a perplexed azure as she presented the latest intelligence to the High Command. Their planet is divided into hundreds of competing territories. They speak thousands of different languages. By all logical measures, they should be tearing themselves apart. Fleet Commander Zarkax studied the holographic display of Earth's nations, his inner eyelids narrowing. And yet they advance. Not despite their chaos, but because of it. Vextra brought up a series of technological progress charts. In the time we've been observing them, they developed 18 different countermeasures to our stealth technology. Most failed, some were absurd, but 3, she paused, her mandibles clicking nervously. 3 actually work. The implications hung heavy in the command chamber. No species had ever detected a Kravak stealth ship, let alone developed multiple methods to do so. The fact that humans had accomplished this with their primitive technology was unprecedented. On Earth, Dr. Sarah Chen and her team were making their own assessments. The underground facility in the Rockies had grown into a global innovation hub, where scientists from every nation worked together, breaking down the barriers of language and culture in pursuit of common survival. "They're watching us," Chen explained to the latest group of international representatives. "But they're watching us like scientists observe bacteria in a petri dish, looking for patterns, behaviors, weaknesses. They don't realize we're watching them back." General Santos, who had become a fixture in the facility, nodded grimly. "And what have we learned?" Chen gestured to a complex display of energy signatures. "Their technology is incredible, but it's stagnant. They haven't made any significant advances in what we estimate to be thousands of years. They found what worked and stopped looking for alternatives." Complacency, Santos mused, the ultimate weakness. In orbit, a Kravak scout ship commander named Rectol was reaching a similar conclusion about human unpredictability. He had watched a small human research vessel deliberately sail into a storm that would have given even a Kravak's warship pause. Instead of retreating from the danger, the humans had treated it as an opportunity to gather data about both the storm and their own limitations. "They seek out challenges," he reported to Zarkax. "They intentionally place themselves in dangerous situations, not out of ignorance or bravado, but out of genuine curiosity." The concept was alien to the Kravaks' mindset. Their species had achieved dominance through careful calculation and overwhelming force, not reckless experimentation. Yet these humans treated every failure as a lesson, every setback as a stepping stone. The assessment mission took an unexpected turn when a junior human scientist made what the Kravaks considered a critical mistake. During a routine communication burst, Dr. Maya Patel had included a complete history of human warfare. The Kravaks' High Command initially celebrated this intelligence windfall, but their jubilation quickly turned to concern. They survived multiple global conflicts, Vextra reported, her scales now a troubled crimson. They developed and used atomic weapons against themselves, and yet, instead of extinction, these experiences drove them to create international cooperation frameworks. Zarkax found himself returning to the human historical records again and again. Each time, he discovered new aspects that challenged Kryvak's assumptions. Humans didn't just survive their catastrophes, they emerged stronger, more innovative, more united. Meanwhile, Dr. Chen's team had made a breakthrough in understanding Kryvak's psychology. They're perfect predators, she explained to the Global Defense Council. Their entire civilization is built on the assumption of their own superiority. They don't adapt because they've never needed to, until now. The council chambers erupted in discussion as the implications became clear. Humanity's greatest weakness, its chaotic, fractious nature, might actually be its greatest strength against an enemy that had never learned to deal with the unexpected. In the depths of space, Zarkax made a decision that would alter the course of galactic history. Prepare the ultimatum, he ordered Vextra. It's time to force their submission before they become even more unpredictable. But even as the Kryvak's fleet began its approach, humans were doing what they did best, innovating, adapting, and preparing surprises. In laboratories and workshops around the world, scientists and engineers worked on technologies that defied conventional logic. They weren't trying to match Kryvak's technology. They were creating entirely new approaches that the aliens would never expect. Dr. Chen stood at her workstation, reviewing the latest data from their quantum communication experiments. The Kryvaks thought they were dealing with a primitive species that would either submit or be crushed. Instead, they were about to face something they had never encountered in all their millennia of conquest, a species that thrived on challenge and change. They think they're coming to break us, General Santos observed, standing beside her. But you can't break something that bends. Chen nodded, her fingers dancing across the holographic interface as she finalized the calculations for humanity's next move. The Kryvaks have spent thousands of years being the perfect predators, she said, but they've forgotten something crucial. What's that? Perfect predators don't need to evolve, and anything that stops evolving, she smiled as the calculations aligned perfectly, becomes prey. The ultimatum. The Kryvak's ultimatum arrived at dawn. Massive holographic projections appeared simultaneously over every major city on Earth, showing Fleet Commander Zarkax in all his alien glory. His iridescent scales gleamed with assumed victory as his message boomed across the planet in perfect translations of every major language. People of Earth, his voice resonated with the confidence of 1,000 conquered worlds. Your world has been chosen to join the Kryvak's dominion. Submit within one planetary rotation, and you will be permitted to serve as a protectorate species. Resist and you will be eradicated. This is not a negotiation. This is your destiny. In the Rocky Mountain Command Center, Dr. Chen watched the transmission with the rest of Earth's hastily assembled leadership council. The room was silent, but it wasn't the silence of fear. It was the quiet focus of people who had prepared for this moment. General Santos was the first to speak. Well, they certainly have a flair for the dramatic. They expect us to panic, Chen observed, her fingers already flying over her console. The historical data shows that 94% of species surrender immediately upon receiving this ultimatum. The remaining 6% typically launch desperate, uncoordinated attacks. Then let's show them option number 3. The general turned to the assembled council. Are we ready? Around the world, humanity's response was already in motion. It wasn't the chaos the Kryvaks expected. There was no mass panic, no futile military posturing. Instead, Earth responded with something unprecedented in galactic history, a counter-proposal. Dr. Chen led the team that crafted the response. The message that streamed back to the Kryvak's fleet was unlike anything they had received in their millennia of conquest. It began with a simple question that would shake the foundations of their empire. Why, the human transmission asked, does cooperation frighten you so much? Aboard the Eternal Dominion, Zarkax watched in stunned silence as the human response continued. Instead of begging for mercy or threatening resistance, the humans had sent detailed proposals for cultural exchange, technological cooperation, and mutual defense pacts. "They can't be serious," Vextra hissed, her scales flickering between confusion and rage. "This is not how conquest works." But Zarkax wasn't so sure. The humans had included something else in their transmission, evidence that they had already reverse-engineered several Kryvax technologies, not to weaponize them, but to improve them. "Look at these modifications," he murmured, studying the technical specifications. "They took our quantum communication system and made it more efficient by introducing controlled chaos into the signal pattern. It's elegant." The humans' response continued with a demonstration that made several Kryvax commanders physically recoil. Using their primitive technology combined with salvaged concepts from observing Kryvax ships, they had created hybrid systems that worked in ways the Kryvax had never considered. "They're not just copying our technology," Rector reported, his usual confidence shaken. "They're evolving it, learning from it, making it into something new." On Earth, the response team watched as their message was received. They had gambled everything on a fundamental understanding of Kryvax psychology, that the species' greatest weakness was their inability to comprehend alternatives to their established patterns. The Kryvax built their empire on the assumption that a superior force always prevails, Dr. Chen explained to the council. But they've never encountered a species that sees strength in diversity, that thrives on adaptation rather than domination. The human counterproposal reached its crescendo with a demonstration that would be remembered in galactic history. In perfect synchronization, research facilities around the world activated their hybrid technology arrays. The resulting energy signature was unlike anything the Kryvax had ever encountered, a harmonious blend of human innovation and Kryvax principles. "We could fight," the transmission concluded. "We could show you how we've prepared to resist. But we're offering you something your empire has never had, the chance to evolve." In the tense hours that followed, the Kryvax High Command faced a crisis of philosophy. Their entire civilization was built on the principle of superiority through force. But these humans had demonstrated something different, superiority through adaptation and cooperation. Zarkax found himself drawn to the human historical records again, particularly their countless stories of former enemies becoming allies, of competition driving innovation rather than destruction. It was so fundamentally different from the Kryvax way that it bordered on incomprehensible. "They're offering us a choice we've never given others," he realized aloud. "The question is, are we capable of taking it?" The response came from an unexpected source. Young Kryvax warriors, who had been studying human transmissions, began asking questions that had never been voiced in the Empire's history. Why did they only conquer? What could they learn from other species? What if there was more than one path to greatness? As the deadline for humanity's submission approached, the Kryvax found themselves facing not just a military decision, but an existential one. The humans had done something unprecedented. They had made the Kryvax question their own nature. In the Rocky Mountain facility, Dr. Chen and her team waited. They had shown the Kryvax a mirror, revealing not just humanity's potential, but the limitations of the Empire's own rigid thinking. Now came the moment of truth. "They'll either evolve," General Santos mused, "or they'll attack. Either way, we've already changed them." Chen nodded, watching the massive Kryvax ships looming in Earth's orbit. "The question isn't whether humanity will survive," she said. "The question is whether the Kryvax are capable of becoming something more than perfect predators." The ultimatum's deadline approached its final minutes, and two civilizations stood on the brink, one poised to defend its right to exist on its own terms, the other facing a challenge that everything had believed for millennia. The next few moments would determine not just Earth's fate, but the future of galactic civilization itself. Innovation under fire. The Kryvax attacked at midnight. Not because they chose to, but because they had to. Humanity's response had created a fracture in their ranks, a philosophical divide that threatened thousands of years of absolute unity. For the first time in their history, some Krivaks questioned the path of conquest, and nothing terrified the High Command more than doubt. "Burn their cities," Supreme Commander Ixtal ordered, having assumed emergency control from the wavering Zarkaks. "Show them what happens to those who dare corrupt Krivak's purity with their chaos." The initial assault was devastating. Krivak's energy weapons carved glowing paths through Earth's atmosphere, their targeting systems seeking out major population centers. But as the first salvos reached their targets, something unexpected happened. The beams curved. In the Rocky Mountain Command Center, Dr. Chen allowed herself a small smile. "Gravitational lensing arrays operating at 93% efficiency," she reported. "Their energy weapons are being redirected into our collection networks." General Santos watched the tactical displays with fierce pride. Across the globe, seemingly primitive human technology was doing the impossible, not by matching Krivak's power, but by turning it against itself. Who would have thought, she mused, that old weather satellites could be modified to bend light on such a massive scale? The Krivaks' response was predictable. They launched their ground forces. Massive dropships descended through the atmosphere, carrying the Empire's elite warriors in their legendary battle suits. They expected to find panicked humans hiding in bunkers. Instead, they found innovation. In the streets of Tokyo, Krivak's warriors discovered that their advanced motion sensors were worse than useless. The humans had flooded the frequency bands with conflicting data, turning the aliens' superior technology into a liability. In Rio de Janeiro, their energy shields failed against primitive projectile weapons that had been modified to oscillate at exactly the right frequency. "Impossible," Sub-Commander Vextra hissed as reports flooded in. "They're using technology centuries behind ours. They cannot be defeating our best weapons with recycled satellites and modified rifles." But they were. Humanity had spent months preparing not to match Krivak's technology, but to subvert it. They had studied the aliens' perfect, unchanging systems and found their fundamental weakness: they couldn't adapt to the unexpected. Dr. Maya Patel, the scientist who had accidentally leaked human military history, now led a team that exploited this weakness. "The Krivaks built their empire on overwhelming force," she explained as she coordinated global defense efforts. "They never needed to think laterally, but humans. Lateral thinking is our specialty." This became devastatingly clear when the Krivaks deployed their autonomous battle drones. The machines were masterpieces of engineering, virtually unstoppable in conventional combat. But humanity didn't fight conventionally. "Did you know," Dr. Chen remarked to General Santos as they watched the drones fall from the sky, "that a modified car alternator can generate an electromagnetic pulse that perfectly matches the resonant frequency of Krivak's quantum processors?" The Krivaks commanders couldn't understand how their perfect weapons were being defeated by what they saw as primitive tricks. They had no framework for comprehending how humans could take simple technologies and combine them in ways that defied conventional logic. In orbit, Zarkaks watched the battle unfold with a mixture of horror and fascination. He had warned the High Command that humans were different, but they couldn't be defeated through standard tactics. Now he watched as humanity proved him right in ways even he hadn't imagined. "They're not just fighting us," he realized. "They're learning from us. Every weapon we deploy, every tactic we use, they absorb and adapt." The truth was even more profound. Humanity hadn't prepared for this war by building bigger weapons or stronger shields. They had prepared by understanding their enemies so completely that they could turn the Krivaks' greatest strengths into weaknesses. In countless labs and workshops around the world, humans continued to innovate even as the battle raged. When the Krivaks deployed their feared psychic warriors, they found their telepathic attacks scattered by a global network of modified radio towers broadcasting on frequencies that exactly match human brainwaves. "The beauty of it," Dr. Chen explained to her team as they fine-tuned the system, "is that we're not blocking their powers. We're amplifying them so much that they can't focus, like trying to find a whisper in a stadium full of echoes. The Kravax military had never faced defeat. They had never even faced a serious challenge. Now, they found themselves in a battle where superior technology meant nothing because humans simply refused to fight on their terms. In New Delhi, Kravax warriors found their perfect battle formations disrupted by swarms of modified civilian drones. In Moscow, their advanced camouflage systems were rendered useless by networks of traffic cameras reprogrammed to detect subtle gravitational distortions. Perhaps most devastatingly, humans had turned the Kravax's own communication network against them. Dr. Chen's team had discovered that the aliens' quantum entanglement systems could be interfered with by precisely timed bursts of noise from modified cell phone towers. They built their entire command structure on the assumption that their communications were unbreakable. She noted as Kravax formations fell into confusion across the globe. They never considered that somebody might not try to break them, but simply make them unusable. As the first day of battle drew to a close, the Kravax faced a situation they had never encountered in their long history of conquest. They weren't losing to superior technology or overwhelming force. They were losing to innovation, to creativity, to humanity's endless capacity to adapt and overcome. In the Rocky Mountain Command Center, Dr. Chen and General Santos watched as the Kravax fleet began to pull back, their perfect formations showing signs of disorder for the first time. "They'll be back," Santos said, "with new weapons, new tactics." Chen nodded, but she was smiling. "And we'll be ready, because that's what humans do. We adapt, we improve, we survive." Above them, the stars flickered with the energy discharges of retreating Kravax ships, their perfect predator society facing a truth they had never had to confront before. Sometimes the prey evolves faster than the hunter. The hidden strength. The Kravax had always believed that emotions were a weakness. For millennia, they had viewed the passionate responses of other species as proof of their inferiority. Now, as the war entered its second week, they were learning just how wrong they had been. "They fight harder when they're losing," Supreme Commander Ixtal observed with growing frustration. "It defies logic. Their defeat should crush their spirit, yet it seems to fuel them." The observation came after yet another failed assault on a human stronghold. This time, it was a seemingly insignificant research facility in Antarctica. The Kravax had expected an easy victory against the isolated outpost. Instead, they found themselves facing scientists who had transformed their weather monitoring equipment into weapons that turned the polar environment itself against the invaders. Dr. Chen, coordinating global defense from the Rocky Mountain facility, understood what the Kravax couldn't grasp. "They think emotions cloud judgment," she explained to General Santos. "They don't understand that feelings like fear, love, and determination can drive innovation in ways pure logic never could." This truth was demonstrated dramatically in Mumbai, where a teenage programmer named Arun Patel, no relation to Dr. Maya Patel, had stayed awake for 3 days straight, driven by the fear for his family's safety. The result was an algorithm that could predict Kravax attack patterns with stunning accuracy, not by analyzing their tactics, but by recognizing their psychological limitations. "They always choose the most efficient path," Arun explained when his work was discovered. "But efficiency isn't always the best strategy, especially when your enemy knows you'll never choose differently." The Kravax were learning this lesson the hard way. Their perfect formations, their precise attack patterns, their unwavering adherence to proven tactics, all of it became a liability against humans who fought with both heart and mind. In orbit, Zarkax watched the conflict with growing understanding. He had been relieved of command for showing weakness, for suggesting that the humans might be worth learning from, but he continued to study them. What he saw changed his view of strength forever. "Look at this," he told Rectol, who had remained loyal to him. They watched footage of a human rescue operation, where civilians risked their lives to save strangers trapped in a collapsed building. By Kravax logic, this is wasteful, inefficient, Yet these moments of apparent weakness seemed to make them stronger as a whole. The turning point came when the Kryvacs attempted to use their most powerful weapon, fear itself. They had broken countless species by demonstrating their absolute power, showing conquered peoples that resistance was futile. But humans responded to fear differently. When the Kryvacs deployed their planet-cracker weapons, massive ships capable of tearing worlds apart, humanity didn't surrender. Instead, something remarkable happened. Former enemies became allies. Political differences dissolved. The entire human race united not in fear, but in determined defiance. We've detected unusual energy signatures from all human population centers, Vextra reported, her scales shifting in confusion. They're singing. Indeed, across the globe, humans had begun broadcasting music into space. Not messages of surrender, not pleas for mercy, but songs of hope, determination, and resilience. The Kryvacs, who had never developed art or music, found themselves facing something they couldn't quantify or counter. Dr. Chen's team had discovered that these harmonized broadcasts, when properly modulated, could interfere with the quantum field generators that powered the planet-cracker weapons. But more importantly, the music served as a reminder to every human that they weren't fighting alone. Emotions aren't our weakness, Dr. Maya Patel declared as she coordinated the global broadcast. They're the source of our creativity, our determination, our ability to see solutions where pure logic fails. The Kryvacs' high command was facing an unprecedented crisis. Their warriors, exposed to human emotions and creativity through captured broadcasts and direct contact, were beginning to ask questions. Some even began to exhibit behaviors their society had long suppressed: curiosity, empathy, wonder. They're infecting us, Supreme Commander Ixtol raged. These primitive feelings are spreading through our ranks like a virus. But it wasn't an infection, it was an awakening. Young Kryvacs warriors, particularly those who had faced humans in direct combat, began to understand that there was strength in what their society had dismissed as weakness. A Kryvac scout team leader named Kextry made history when she disobeyed a direct order to fire on a human hospital. I saw them rushing into danger to save others, she later reported. It made no tactical sense, yet their apparent weakness created a strength we had never considered. In the Rocky Mountain Command Center, Dr. Chen and her team watched as more Kryvacs began to break from their rigid patterns. The Empire's perfect unity was cracking, not from human weapons, but from exposure to human nature itself. They spent thousands of years evolving to be perfect predators, Chen observed. But they never understood that true strength comes from the heart as much as the mind. General Santos nodded, watching the tactical displays that showed more Kryvacs ships breaking formation. They thought they were coming to break us, she said. Instead, we're teaching them how to feel. As the war entered its third week, the Kryvacs faced a threat greater than any weapon: the realization that their perfect society had sacrificed something essential in its pursuit of power. They had eliminated the very things that, as humans proved every day, could drive a species to exceed its own limitations. In space, Zarkax made a decision that would reshape galactic history. He opened a channel to Earth, bypassing the High Command, and spoke not with military precision, but with something new in his voice: emotion. We have been wrong, he declared, not just about humans, but about strength itself. We wish to learn. The hidden strength that humanity had shown wasn't in their weapons or their technology. It was in their capacity to feel, to care, to create, and to inspire those same qualities in others, even in an enemy that had spent millennia believing such things were beneath them. The perfect predators were learning that true evolution requires more than just sharp teeth and strong claws. It requires a heart, a new order. The galactic society that emerged after the Earth conflict bore little resemblance to the rigid hierarchy that had dominated space for millennia. The transformation began not with a treaty or surrender, but with a conversation. In the neutral ground of Earth's orbit, aboard a hastily constructed space station built with both human and Kryvax technology, Dr. Sarah Chen sat across from Fleet Commander Zarkax. Neither side had formally ended hostilities, yet here they were, talking about the future. "Your species has shown us something we had forgotten was possible," Zarkax said, his scales shifting through colors that reflected newly discovered emotions. Change. The meeting was being broadcast across Earth and to every Kryvax world. The Supreme Command had tried to block the transmission, but their own communications technology, modified by human ingenuity, now worked against them. Every being in the galaxy could witness this historic moment. "We never wanted to defeat you," Dr. Chen replied. "We wanted to show you another way. War isn't the only path to strength. Sometimes the greatest power comes from admitting there might be something new to learn." The impact of these words rippled through the galaxy. On countless worlds that had lived under Kryvax dominion, species that had been forced into submission began to see possibility where before there had been only resignation. The perfect predators were evolving, and with them, the entire galactic order. General Santos, watching from Earth, understood the magnitude of what was happening. "We're not just ending a war," she told the assembled world leaders. "We're starting a revolution." She was right. Within days of the orbital meeting, Kryvax warrior groups began declaring independence from the Supreme Command. Not to fight against their own people, but to learn from others. Rektor led the first delegation of Kryvax scientists to Earth, eager to understand how humans had adapted their technology in ways they had never imagined. "Your species takes things apart, not just to understand them," he observed while working with Dr. Maya Patel's team, "but to imagine how they could be different. This concept of what if, it changes everything." The changes came swiftly. The Kryvax, once they allowed themselves to embrace emotion and creativity, proved to be remarkable students. Their technological precision, combined with human innovation, led to breakthroughs that transformed life across the galaxy. Dr. Chen found herself at the center of these changes, working with Zarkax to establish the first galactic exchange, a place where species could freely share knowledge, culture, and ideas. The former Kryvax battle fleet, once used to enforce submission, was repurposed into an exploration and research armada. "We spent millennia perfecting our ability to conquer," Zarkax remarked during the exchange's opening ceremony. "Now we will spend millennia perfecting our ability to learn." The Supreme Command made one final attempt to restore the old order. Supreme Commander Ixtol gathered the loyalist fleets for an assault on Earth, determined to end what he saw as the corruption of his species. The response he received shocked even his hardened warriors. Every species the Kryvax had ever conquered, inspired by humanity's example, rose up not in violent rebellion, but in peaceful defiance. They didn't attack the loyalist fleets, they simply refused to submit any longer. Worlds that had been enemies under Kryvax rule now reached out to each other, sharing resources and knowledge. The young Kryvax scout leader Kextre, who had first disobeyed orders to protect a human hospital, emerged as a symbol of this new age. She established the first mixed-species medical course, combining Kryvax biological knowledge with human emotional intelligence to heal not just bodies, but minds and spirits. "The perfect predator," she declared, "is not the one who never changes, but the one who knows when to stop being a predator at all." In the decades that followed, the galaxy underwent a transformation that no one could have predicted. The Kryvax, freed from their rigid adherence to perfection, discovered that their greatest strength lay in their ability to change. That ancient empire became the foundation for a new kind of society, one built on cooperation, innovation, and the understanding that true power comes from diversity, not uniformity. Dr. Chen, now elderly but still active in the Galactic Exchange, often reflected on how it all began. "We didn't win because we were stronger or more advanced," she would tell students from 100 different worlds. "We won because we showed them that there's no such thing as perfect. There's only growing, learning, and becoming more than what you were." The former Kryvax battle fleets now carried scientists, explorers, and diplomats to the edges of known space. Where they once sought worlds to conquer, they now sought new ideas to understand. Their fearsome battle suits were modified into exploration gear, protecting wearers as they studied new environments rather than destroying them. And on Earth, in the Rocky Mountain facility where humanity had once prepared for war, a new generation of humans and Kryvax worked together. They studied not just technology or science, but art, music, literature, all the things that the Kryvax had once dismissed as weakness. The perfect predator adapts or dies, Zarkax wrote in his widely shared memoirs. But the truly wise predator learns to become something more than a predator at all. Humanity didn't defeat us, they freed us, and in doing so, they freed the galaxy. The stars shone brighter now, countless worlds communicating, trading, sharing in ways that would have been unimaginable during the Age of Conquest. The perfect predators had evolved into something new, something better, and it all began because a species they had dismissed as primitive dared to show them that perfection isn't about being unchanging, it's about having the courage to change. In the end, humanity's greatest victory wasn't defeating the Kryvax. It was showing the galaxy that every species, no matter how set in its ways, has the capacity to evolve. The age of the perfect predator was over. The age of endless possibility had begun.